Yo, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Adamoose, and today in this series called In Depth, I'm going to be breaking down everything that you need to know about Hecarim Jungle. Hecarim is an extremely powerful carry jungler with fast clear speeds and strong team fighting. He's relatively easy to learn and is a top tier pick in any elo for Season 12. If you enjoy the content, it really helps me out if you could leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel to help your boy out with the YouTube algorithm. If you want to talk with me and other members in the community, be sure to join the Discord link that's in the description. I hope you guys can learn something. Enjoy the video. Hecarim's passive is called Warpath. Passively, Hecarim gains bonus attack damage based on his bonus movement speed. This is extremely straightforward, but is at the core of Hecarim's identity. Since bonus movement speed equates to more damage, Hecarim's item build and runes heavily revolves around increasing his mobility. Hecarim's Q is called Rampage. Hecarim cleaves his glaive around himself, dealing physical damage to all nearby enemies, reduced to 60% against minions. If Hec damages at least one enemy, he gains a buff for 8 seconds, stacking up to 2 times. Subsequent damaging hits against enemies will refresh this buff's timer. This buff increases Rampage's damage and reduces its base cooldown, and these buffs are increased even further at 2 stacks. This is a simple ability, but is Hecarim's main DPS spell. Keeping up 2 stacks is extremely important, not only for increased damage in fights, but also for faster clear speeds. Hecarim's W is called Spirit of the Dread. Hecarim surrounds himself with the Spirit of Dread for 4 seconds, dealing damage to all nearby enemies every second. While this is active, Hecarim is also healed for 30% of post-mitigation damage dealt to enemies that are within the area, reduced to 15% for damage dealt by allies. This is a sustain tool used to keep his health topped up while clearing and in team fights. Keep in mind that this heals you based on damage dealt to enemies, so in chaotic team fights, this can be used for some massive sustain. Hecarim's E is called Devastating Charge. Hecarim becomes ghosted and gains bonus movement speed that scales up for 4 seconds. Hec's next basic attack during this time gains bonus range and causes him to dash towards the target's direction, revealing them for 1 second. If the target remains nearby during this dash, the bonus movement speed is consumed and Hecarim knocks them back, stunning them and dealing physical damage based on the distance traveled. Devastating Charge resets Hecarim's basic attack timer and can crit as well. Obviously the damage and movement speed is great, but the knockback is really what makes this a strong ability. This is usually used to speed past enemies and knock them into your team, making picks versus out of position targets. You can also use all of your other abilities during Devastating Charge's duration, which we'll discuss in further detail later. Hecarim's ultimate is called Onslaught of Shadows. Hecarim summons 5 spectral riders in an arrow formation and dashes with displacement immunity in the target direction. This deals magic damage and reveals all enemies in his path for 2.5 seconds. Where he stops, enemies in a radius around Hecarim also flee from him and are slowed up to 99% during the duration. This wave of spectral riders always travels the full length, regardless of where Hecarim stops himself. This means that you can also shortcast your R, making it so that the wave of spectral riders goes out without fully committing into the middle of the enemy team. This ultimate is an extremely powerful teamfighting tool since it provides massive AoE CC and utility. Although it's a bit hard to mess up, knowing the precise time to pull the trigger will be a massive difference maker for those important team fights. For ability maxing, Hecarim maxes Q first, E second, and W third in all games. Now let's hop right into Hecarim's best rune choices for Season 12. Hec's most common and strongest keystone by far is Phase Rush. Not only does this provide Hecarim with more utility in fights, it also increases his damage output. This is uniquely strong on Hecarim due to his passive Warpath. To close out the sorcery tree, Nimbus Cloak, Celerity, and Water Walking are the standard choices. All of these have one goal, which is to maximize your move speed, which in turn gives you bonus damage. Now for secondaries, there are a couple options. For starters, Precision is the standard choice ran by most high elo players, with Triumph and usually Legend Tenacity versus CC, or Legend Alacrity for DPS. If the enemy team is lacking CC, Inspiration with either Magical Footwear, Futures Market, or Cosmic Insight is a nice choice for some extra utility. In some rare cases where you want some extra tankiness, Resolve Secondary with Conditioning and Unflinching can also be pretty strong. Next would be the Conqueror setup, which although has fallen slightly from the meta, is still very powerful into teams with multiple bruisers or tanks. To close out the precision tree, Triumph, Legend Alacrity for DPS, Legend Tenacity into heavy CC, Coup de Grace into squishies, or Last Stand into low burst, tankier teams. For secondary, Sorcery with either Nimbus Cloak and Celerity, or Celerity and Water Walking are the most standard. If you want a more scaling option, Resolve with Conditioning and Revitalize can also be a good choice. It's also important to mention that Hecarim runs Ghost over Flash due to its synergy with his kit. Ghost is amazing on Hec since it boosts his damage and pairs perfectly with his E. Ignite can also work into tough matchups such as Olaf to cut his healing, but honestly not recommended as I think it's much less consistent without tons of practice. For Rune Shards, it's still up for debate whether Attack Speed or Double Adaptive Force is the best setup. I personally prefer Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and either Armor or MR, but definitely try out both to see which you prefer best. Now that we've covered runes, let's go over Hecarim's item builds. For starters, both Red and Blue Smite are viable options. Red Smite is the most common for extra dueling power, while Blue Smite can be great into squishier, mobile teams to lock down slippery targets. For boots, Ionian Boots of Lucidity are by far the most common choice for extra playmaking potential. If the enemy team is either full AD or has a ridiculous amount of magic damage and CC, Plated Steel Caps and Merc Treads can also be solid. For mythics, Turbo Chem Tank is the most common pick for the top Hecarim players in the current meta. The tankiness and active ability give him so much playmaking potential, especially once you get into the higher elos. With that being said, Trinity Force and Divine Sunder are also very strong carry items that are usually run with the Conqueror setup. Although I think Chem Tank is a more consistent choice, the carry options are still very strong, especially in lower elos. For core items, Dead Man's Plate, Force of Nature, Man Immune, and Death's Dance are the go-to pickups. Dead Man's Plate and Force of Nature both grant resistance plus move speed, Man Immune is great for increased damage scaling, and Death's Dance for increased armor and dueling. From this point, your choices are pretty open depending on what you need in that specific game. Usually you want to build tanky to engage in frontline for your team, but you can always pick up some extra damage to threaten the enemy's backline. Knowing what to build can be a bit tricky, but is extremely important to know if you want to succeed on Hec. The best advice I can give is to analyze the enemy's team comp in every game and think of which items will counter them in that situation. Doing this every game will give yourself the highest chances of winning. Now let's discuss Hecarim's general jungle strategy and pathing. First is making sure you're using your Q in between auto attacks to maximize DPS since it's such a low cooldown. You can also use your Q to kill multiple camps at once, such as Blue and Gromp, or while dragging camps to their maximum patience range since you can cast Q while moving. Next is learning how to effectively drag your camps not only to increase efficiency, but also to keep your Q stacks in between camps. This is very important since keeping 2 Q stacks throughout your clear will greatly speed up your farming. While ganking, the most important thing you can do is save your E pushback for the right moment. Sometimes the best play is to run past enemies to ensure that you can push them away from their escape. Too many times I see low elo Hecarim players running directly at their target just to push them away, failing their ganks. On top of that, remember that you can use all your other abilities during your E. A cool trick is to charge your E, then use your ultimate to fly behind enemies and then push them back into your team. This works so well since your E's charge duration is paused during Onslaught of Shadows, allowing you to close massive distances against enemies and shoving them backwards. Now for actual jungle pathing, the most consistent is by far the full clear route, which can be done by starting on either side of the map and pathing towards Scuttle on spawn at 315. If done correctly, Hecarim can fully clear and hit level 4 before Scuttle spawns, allowing you to have a strong spike to fight over the crab. Keep in mind that you want to put a second point into Q for this clear, since your E is pretty useless when farming. Just be wary of getting invaded and having no E to escape. A good way to avoid this is to start raptors or wolves at level 1 to hide your starting location since your laners will not have to leash. If you see gank opportunities and have laners with CC to facilitate, a 3 4, or 5 camp gank path can all be strong choices as well. With that being said, all of these paths have different variations, so learning all of them will come with time. If you need to get onto the map ASAP, a Red Raptor's Gromp clear into gank is one of the strongest current paths, which allows you to hit level 3 and start influencing your lanes, usually catching enemies off guard. In general though, Hecarim's extremely fast farming allows him to out-tempo enemies and get huge CS leads with solid pathing. This gets even easier in the mid-game, since you can farm faster than your camps respawn, giving yourself tons of time to make plays on the map without losing out on farm. Avoiding losing fights and outscaling your opponents through farming is a staple of Hecarim's playstyle that's crucial to learn if you want to succeed. Hecarim's biggest weakness is definitely that he can be punished by strong dueling junglers who invade him in the early stages. Although he's not the weakest duelist, he definitely relies on his level 6 and item spikes to start having serious impact. This is why champions such as Lee Sin, Elise, Xin Zhao, and Volibear can all be tough to deal with, especially in higher elos. To build on this, Hecarim is also extremely useless when he falls behind, since his kit forces him to commit in fights. Not having those completed items or being down in levels means getting instantly deleted once engaging, making him way less effective. Next is that although he seems very mobile due to his E, he's actually very prone to getting caught out without his ultimate. Since Season 12 is packed with ridiculously mobile champs, which all have 69 dashes, Hecarim's E move speed by itself can easily get punished. Last is that Hecarim does start falling off in the very late game, when the enemy carries start picking up their 4th and 5th items. Your job becomes very difficult at this stage, since carries will have defensive items and can easily shred through your resists. It's crucial to know exactly what your win conditions are, and play towards them to make sure you can snowball your lead and close out games efficiently. And finally, let's discuss what makes Hecarim a top tier pick in the Season 12 meta. First and most importantly in my opinion, is his super fast and healthy clears. If left alone farming for a couple minutes, Hecarim can power up very quickly and snowball off CSing alone. This is why good Hecarim players know exactly how to path according to their win conditions in each game to maximize playmaking and farming as much as possible in the process. To build on this, Hecarim is actually a very strong ganking jungler due to his E and Ghost. This allows him to have a very flexible playstyle, farming when there are no opportunities, and ganking when enemy laners are overextended. This is why Hecarim is god tier in high elo, since an experienced Hecarim player can be relevant in almost any game state. On the topic of always being relevant, Hecarim is one of the strongest teamfighting junglers in the game due to his ultimate's massive utility. On top of that, his only non-AoE ability is his E, meaning that if piloted correctly, Hecarim can deal tons of damage to multiple targets at once, giving your team the edge when fighting over important objectives. And finally, Hecarim is a pretty simple champion, which allows boomer players like myself room to pop off without needing some insane mechanics. Being a good Hecarim player is actually more about having solid game knowledge rather than pure skill, which means you'll instantly climb if you have the jungle fundamentals down. Hecarim is an all-around amazing carry jungler that farms fast and dominates teamfights. He deals a ton of damage, provides frontline for your team, and can even be your primary engage. If you're looking for a flexible pick that can carry in literally any game state, Hecarim is definitely the pick for you. That will do it for my Season 12 in-depth guide on Hecarim Jungle. If you want to support my content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep up with my weekly uploads. If you're looking to add more jungle champs to your pool, make sure to check out the rest of my in-depth series to find more guides just like this one. With all that being said, thanks again for watching. Until the next video, peace out.